W grudniu 2013 roku w Warszawie
In December 2013, there was a rally of support for Ukraine in Warsaw, which at the time was the largest street event
w Polsce
in democratic Poland
Wtedy
to date.
poparcia
The
Polaków
support
dla Ukraińców i
in Poland for Ukrainians
stali na
who were
Majdanie.
protesting in Maidan Square was very high, and it was very well felt. Gazeta Wyborcza Daily was published in blue and yellow, the Ukrainian national colors, and also came out in Ukrainians. A number of other periodicals also published special editions in Ukraine, addressed to Ukrainians in Ukraine as well as those living in Poland. This amazing degree of support in Poland was also noticed in Ukraine. Ukrainian social movements, which were emerging during the Maidan protests, because Maidan was a grassroots initiative to a large extent. Many social movements around today were born at the time as informal movements and grew out of the Maidan and have now become NGOs operating in various areas. Polish flags were flown in Kiev as one of the few non-Ukrainian flags. Polish flags were also visible, and Polish social movements were also present in Ukraine. These weren't just liberal and left-wing movements, but also right-wing movements. The Gazeta Polska clubs were among the first to bring the Polish flag to Kiev, and that flag was always visible, always somewhere in the front row in broadcasts from Maidan, and it said the Klub Gazety Polskiej. There were concerts organized together, many social initiatives, and I think that's more important, by Ukrainians in Poland were also born at the time. Because the Ukrainians living in Warsaw then, and there were fewer of them than after 2015, Ukrainians would go outside the Ukrainian embassy together with Poles, and their number was more or less equal to support all the people out there in Maidan Square in Kiev. That solidarity was a great thing because a lot of initiatives of Ukrainians in Poland were born at the time. These initiatives are still around today. Movements such as the Our Choice Foundation or the Euromaidan initiative in Warsaw were born outside the Ukrainian embassy in Warsaw. Some of these expanded their scope of operations, and they continue to operate in Poland. They have taken over the responsibility to help people in Ukraine and then migrants from Ukraine coming to Poland after the wave of migration in 2015. The most important form of assistance, relief, was medical assistance. Ukrainians living in Poland sent medicine to the wounded, and the wounded were treated in Polish hospitals. There is an initiative that helps injured Ukrainians injured in the war in Donbas, and treats them here in Poland. That's very well appreciated by Ukrainians, and I think it was a cornerstone for the way Polish people are seen in Ukraine today.
Polacy i Polki
Previously, Polish people were seen
na jednym z najwyższych
were
poziomów
were
razem
liked. They were liked, much like Belarusians and Georgians. But after the Maidan, after this support, the number of people
ze strony społeczeństwa
seeing Poles as friends,
robiło się wyższe i wyższe.
the number of Ukrainians seeing Poles as friends increased, continued to increase after the Maidan.
Niestety chciałbym
In response to this solidarity showed by Poles, I'd like to compare this solidarity with what we're seeing with regard to Belarus, what we saw in August.
z
Solidarity with Belarusians in Poland was not as high as it was with respect to Ukrainians, and one reason I see is that there were changes in Polish politics that shut Poland off from the world. I can say this as a journalist at the international desk, that international news in Poland is not popular at the moment. There's much less
niż powiedzmy
response, much less interest in international affairs than was the case in 2013. 2013 was the height of Poland's interest in what was happening in its neighborhood and in the world. At the time, there was a need, or Poland and Polish people wanted to show this solidarity, to give an example, and to share. Today, Poland itself, and this is an objective fact, needs international help, needs solidarity, needs to be shown that democratic Poland is not alone in its struggle, and that's very important. And it's confirmed by the Ukrainian example, which shows that when there is no such assistance, social movements can often get lost when they don't see support. And these movements can soon
z tych ruchów nic nie wyniknie.
fall apart.
To pokazują na przykład
And this,
inicjatywy, które odbywają
I can compare initiatives we're seeing in Russian in the regions, not in Moscow and Petersburg, but a lot of local initiatives are calling to the international community for support to sign petitions. It seems like a small thing, but in those regions it matters a lot to them, and these initiatives are often fall apart, as opposed to the initiatives that emerged in Ukraine around Maidan. They continue to exist and strengthen democratic society in Ukraine because in 2013, in 2014, there was this international solidarity, including solidarity from Poland. I also see what's happening in Poland recently. I go to various protests organized by Polish civil society, and in these years, I think back to a story from the times of the first Maidan when I was 18. I was in my first year of university, and our university said we couldn't go to the Maidan protests, saying students shouldn't get involved in politics. There was a lot of pressure from the authorities and our teachers to prevent us from getting political. And this was true in different universities, various universities. But we went out despite these attempts, and it worked. Because even in post-Soviet societies that are very skeptical as regards democratic activity and street protests, and even then there was a resurgence, a revival And what helped us was the support we got from around the world. Now, the narrative that every social movement has a political agenda is also present in Poland. When you hear that everything around you is becoming political and shortly a yellow star against a blue background will be considered a political statement, I want to tell every man and woman in Poland not to give in to this false narrative, because it's easy to get confused. People give in and stop supporting pro-democracy movements. But it's worth having faith. Ukrainians continue to believe, to have faith, despite two Maidans, despite the war raging in eastern Ukraine, despite the annexation of Crimea. We continue to believe. We also believe in Poland. We believe in the people of Poland.